What's up, guys? So I just finished a game on Lead Chess that illustrated a really important concept, and that has to do with when you transition from the middle game to the end game. So I want to show you this game. It was a 3-minute game, but regardless of the fact that it was a shorter time control game, the lesson that's going to be learned here I think is really valuable. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm going to go quickly through the opening. A little bit of a weird opening here, a6. I don't really know what that's all about, but okay, we developed some pieces. I'm not going to focus on the opening too much. Right here, this was not a, let's see, sorry, right here. Not a good move, but it does kind of make some sense. Like maybe black can get some counterplay by striking in the center. It turns out it's not good. And the reason is because I captured, I was white, by the way. I captured and I created an isolated pawn, okay? And so the tactics don't actually work. The fork here doesn't really work because I have the threat on this knight. And anyway, we get this bunch of trades. Bishop here, and I castled long to put the pressure on the isolated pawn, okay? So we're still in the middle game. Black castled, and I won the deep pawn. All right, so I took it, and black traded, and then played the move bishop to f6. This is kind of the critical moment in the game, where we're still, I would say, in the middle game, but I have the option basically to take it into an endgame, right? Like I can trade queens, and then after I take the queen, most likely I'm going to get a chance to trade another pair of rooks, which is really going to go to an endgame. Now, there is this pawn over here hanging. I think that would be a terrible idea. I didn't do that. And yes, Stockfish agrees with me. My advantage goes away significantly if I play that, because queen a5 happens. I got to be careful because the rooks are going to be coming. There's already a bishop. Now there's a queen I have to deal with. There's a lot of threats on my king. Black's king is very safe. This is not the kind of position you want to put yourself in. Even though I'm getting 2 pawns, now I'm like, I might get checkmated, okay? So no reason to do that. So that's not a move I was considering. Now, I could have moved the queen somewhere else, kept it on the board, and then black's going to move their queen somewhere, and the game goes on. But I thought to myself, okay, I'm up a pawn. Should I go into an endgame? Now, if you remember, one of the recent videos on the channel was called 15 Rules for the Endgame. And one of those rules was that 99 cases out of 100, if you're only up 1 pawn and there are pawns only on one side of the board, the game is a draw. Okay, does that apply in this situation? The answer is no, right? Because there's pawns on both sides of the board. So that is actually a really good thing for me. That's a significant thing to keep in mind, okay? The other thing, opposite colored bishops are very drawish, but is this an opposite colored bishop endgame? No, it's not. These are the same colored bishops, right? Dark squares and dark squares, okay? So they're going to be able to oppose the same squares, right? If they were opposite color, I would think twice before trading because that's probably going to be a draw with only a 1 pawn advantage. Okay, so because of those things, I said, you know what, let me go ahead and go into the end game and trade off, right? So that's what happened. We traded those. I offered, first of all, I played c3. This is a huge blunder. If you want to pause and let me know, why is this a huge blunder? If you had a chance to analyze, I actually lose the game if I do this. Bishop takes b2 check, and I have to take it. I can't go anywhere else, but then I lose my rook, and now I'm probably going to lose. So that was a little sneaky trick there, but I did see that, so I played c3 just to block that off. b5, we traded these rooks, and now my opponent played king to f8. Now here is another super important moment in the game. If you remember back to that video, 15 rules for the endgame, another one of the rules is that the easiest endgames to win are pure pawn endgames, right? That's where there's no extra pieces like this, okay? Because when you add these extra pieces, the piece gets very annoying and it can really prevent you from converting your advantage. And in some cases, if you, for example, if you trade off all the pawns, there's only 1 extra pawn left, black's just going to sacrifice the bishop for the pawn and it's a draw. So if you can trade off the pieces and go into a pure pawn endgame, that's really good for the person who's ahead, which is me, right? I have the extra pawn. So with that knowledge, what sequence of moves do you think I played next? It's a 2-move sequence, and it was actually so good that it made my opponent resign. And just using the concepts that I talked about, you might be able to figure out what I played. So go ahead and think about that for a second, and when you're ready, we'll talk about the solution. All right, so if you're ready to see the solution, the move that I played was bishop to c5 check. And the reason that I played here is because I would like to trade bishops. Okay, that is the whole point of me playing here. I want to force a bishop trade. Because if I can force the bishop trade, like I mentioned, we go into a pure pawn ending, which is good for me because I've got the extra pawn. Okay, so this is the start of that. Now let's talk about how this forces a bishop trade. If the bishop goes back, well, obviously I take it and we get our bishop trade, right? If the king goes here, that's really not good for black because what's the other rule of the endgame? You want to use your king. You want your king to be active. Is black's king going to be active if it's shoved over there in the corner? No, right? And it's going to take a while before the king can figure out a way to get into the game. Whereas my king, I'm just going to come right up the board like this on these white squares, avoiding the bishop, and do whatever I want to do. I can come over here. I can, come over here, whatever. So black doesn't want to do that, which means they want to go this way, which is what was played in the game. And now the second move to the sequence is really the final blow, basically. And if you want to pause again, or if maybe you saw it from the previous position, but the move is bishop to d4. And again, I'm trying to trade those bishops. And what happens now if black doesn't trade? For example, they move away. Look at this pawn. Now I'm winning a second pawn, which is even better for me, right? So the only way black cannot do that, they can go here, but I have g3, and again, I'm still winning the pawn or forcing the bishop trade. So the only thing that black can really do is trade, and now I have this extra pawn, and there's also pawns on both sides of the board. Okay, this is going to be an easy win. The idea is basically bring my king up to the pawn, push the king and pawn together. Black's king has to guard it, right? And then at the right moment, I abandon the pawn, and I either go here or I go here and capture these pawns. So going back here, I noticed that if I threw this check in, it would force black to make an awkward decision, and then I could play bishop d4 to force the trade, and I'm going to go into a winning endgame, right? And so this is how you want to use your endgame knowledge, right? Like I wasn't calculating, going back all the way here, I wasn't calculating like 20 moves deep, like, okay, takes, the king going to move here, and the bishop's going to move here, and all these variations. I'm just thinking about principles, general things that I've learned, some of those 15 rules of the endgame, right? And how can I use those rules to make wise choices in the middle game? And so that led me to trade this off. That led me to want to trade some more pieces off, which I was able to do. And that helped me figure out this move right here, bishop c5 followed by bishop d4. So that's kind of how you want to use that endgame knowledge. You don't want to wait until it's too late and you get to the end game and it's like, oh, well, yep, I know from what I learned, this is just a win, or this is just a loss, or this is just a draw. No, you want to use it in the middle game to plan what's the best move leading up to the end game. So I hope that made sense. I just thought this was super instructive. And I figured since we had just, since I had just posted that other video about the 15 rules of the end game, that it would be applicable and kind of show you how you can transition from the middle game to the end game. Yeah, let me know if you guys have questions. Stay sharp. Play smart. Take care.